Okay, good morning, everyone. Good evening if you're watching from other part of the world. And thank you so much for joining us for our chai and just chat this morning. It's a wonderful Sunday morning here in and around Atlanta, and we have panelists joining from other parts of the states as well. The topic for today is the power of Black influence on South Asian community, or the influence of Black on Brown. I have at least so many questions I have that I want to ask the panelists, and I'm sure you do have too. And some of the registrants have already asked some questions that I will be addressing as I moderate the session today. We have very wonderful panelists, and we have two panelists who were not able to join, and they sent regret in the last minute because one of them lost their best friend, and another person is mom is in the hospital. So we definitely understand emergent situations that do come up, but we're gonna miss them today. But they definitely sent regrets. But we have wonderful panelists here, and I have my chai. And hope you do have yours too. And sit back, relax, but please do learn. The reason, oh my gosh, look, all the panelists. Dr. Joel, I have my water too. So
You said
thank
chai and we are
you.
here.
Thank you. And I would first like to, there you go, Sunny. I would like to introduce the panelists briefly. And as we move forward, we'll come to know more about them. And again, there are no right or wrong answers, and again, there are no right or wrong questions, because I'm going to ask Sunny and many others the questions that I've had, that I hope we all are, even though with sensitivity, but I still want some answers because I don't know whom else to ask. So I hope that we are able to, respond rather than answering, respond to the question that we are able to understand as well. So in the brief introduction, Daniel is working on his video. In fact, Daniel, we were able to see you a few seconds ago. So it did work out. So Daniel and I actually serve on the Forsyth Diversity Committee. It's a Forsyth County here where he lives in. And so that's how I came to know Daniel. But other than that, Daniel is, I mean, so much more, right? He wears different hats, and he ran for office. He's an author. He's a social activist. But what comes to me in my mind is this quotation of his, right? And he's also an author of Nationalism Without Compassion. And so he says, when it comes to equity, it's not just about racial equity, but about environmental equity, energy equity, health equity. We have to begin to bridge those gaps. And I'm privileged to be in the position I'm in. So thank you, Danielle, for joining us this morning as you work out the video from for your camera. So next is Dr. Joel Freeman. Dr. Joel, thank you for joining us near the DC area. And how I know you is just like, I feel you've said it yourself. You're saying that you are an unqualified facilitator simply because you're white. Yeah. And I think we'll come to understand more why you say that, but you have been reading extensively on the Black history. You have gathered 3,000 authentic Black history documents and artifacts since as much as dated as 1553. So we would love the audience, and we would love to know what and how you started this. And of course, you also call it a white man's journey. So thank you. And you've traveled extensively as well from 50 countries around the world. And so thank you for championing the efforts and building and facilitating these conversations, especially the tough conversations. And I can imagine the tough questions you received as well, because sometimes you did look, or mostly you did look different in an audience. So next we have Kavita Pandian. Kavita, thank you for joining us. Kavita is a social activist who has worked in an IT firm, and she runs Save Tamil Nadu Farmers and Our Village, Our Responsibility initiative. She's also a mom, and I've seen her recently just evolve I saw her too. As you know, you see people evolve, and as Sunny and I discussed, like we just see people's posts and the way they, talk and act, and in a way, in a better way, and you see them evolve. So I've seen her become more bolder, and it's like, and asks the questions. Sometimes it might sting, but some of the right questions do take courage to ask, and I've seen her doing that more and more, and I'm sure she's gathered her own some hostility around that as well, but I'm sure she's managing because she believes in what she's doing. So thank you, Kavita, for joining us. And we have Sunny Slaughter, who's the CEO of Sunny Slaughter Consulting LLC, and she is based inside the Washington, D.C., the Beltway of D.C., right? And you have 35 years of intersectoral experiences. You have executive business. You've also been an executive business consultant, a public health expert, racial equity strategist. And Sunny, I was just reading through all these awards you have received, and I thought it'll take the 2-hour session. So can I just mention 2 or 3 awards that you've received? Definitely is from the Community Service Award from American Public Health Association, from the Women's Media Center, and also on Progressive Women's Voices Leadership also have recognized you for your various activities and what you represent for. And Sunny and I have been on task forces in the past on human trafficking, and so that's how I came to know Sunny's passion as well to serve. And next we have Avet Howard Yesu. Avet is a councilman from City of Clarkston. Thank you, Avet, for joining us. And Avet has a degree from he minored in political science and majored in history, and received his master's degree in African history from UCLA in 2002. And you moved to Clarkston in 2002. And also, Avet, you ran for office in 2015, and you've been elected since then. You also probably are the vice mayor, so vice chair or vice mayor. So thank you, Avet, for joining us. So much to learn from you as well. And Ramona. Dr. Ramona Houston, a scholar, social. All I can think of Ramona is think of social impact. So anything you need to think about social impact, how it is done either through corporations, institutions, academics, reach out to Ramona Houston. She's also has talents to advance Black and Brown relationships, but also I think Brown relationships. She also includes the Hispanic community as well, and she's well versed with diversity, equity, and inclusion, racial and social justice. So she's also a U.S. historian, and she is inspiring minds, connecting communities, and making social impact and transforming the world. So Ramona, graduate of Texas University and Clark Atlanta University, we welcome you this morning. Thank you for joining us, Ramona.
Thank you.
And of course, I guess people call him Atlanta's pride. And also India's pride, probably. Dr. Subhash Razdan is the chairman and co-founder of Gandhi Foundation USA, and has distinguished contributions to international affairs. Okay, wait, let me ask this. Do you know that there's a Gandhi full-size statue in front of the MLK King Center? Avet is nodding his head. Has anyone else noticed? Yeah. So that was spearheaded by Dr. Subhash Razdan. So I believe he says it in pride and says that's the only entire full body statue, of Mahatma Gandhi in Atlanta. So thank you, Dr. Razdan. And so you also received the very renowned award from the Indian president in 2008, Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award. So we are very proud of you, and you have represented us well. So thank you so much, Dr. Razdan. And finally, the last but not the least, we have Sukhdeep Kaur. She is the board member of Daswand Network, and which is a coalition for the Sikh community in activism and social involvement and social civic engagement as well. And her background is an educator, and with the very short introduction that I received, I know she's going to bring in tremendous value today to our conversation. So Sukhdeep, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to your to all our dialogues today. Okay, so with that said, let me know if you have if we are ready to go. How the agenda for today is: we are asking general questions with our panelists today, and later we'll go into the deeper discussion. But the general questions I want to start with probably Danielle. So Danielle, if the genie said you have an opportunity for 30 seconds to address any challenges you have, what would you wish it would be? And you have only 30 seconds.
Well, I can see you now.
Oh,
So,
good. We can see you too. So
all right.
never
Well,
give
it's
up.
great. It's great to see everybody. And I mean, if I could see anything, it would be really a more keen understanding and respect for cultural differences. I think what makes us different makes us strong. You know, this is Black History Month, and the relationship, which I'll get into later, with the South Asian community and the Black community has been so amazing. And we in America tend to not tell the whole story. And I think if we told the whole story, and we told a better narrative by inclusion, not just diversity and inclusion as a new buzzword for corporate America, but if we really integrated that concept into how we raise our children, how we build our communities, I think that would definitely put us in the right direction.
Very nice. So I'm just checking on one thing. Thank you. And you did that in 30 seconds. So great. So Sunny, next question is for you. What was your first win that made you confident that you are doing the right thing? If you can unmute yourself.
Of course, that had to be my thing. Unmute yourself. I think that being someone who is always open to relationships and differences and support. I think that I know I'm winning when I can really look at my own life and say, it's not just diverse, it's not just inclusive, but it's just how I live. So it's not, I have normalized um, relationships with others, regardless of race, culture, ethnicity, social economics, and all of the other social determinants of health that tend to divide us.
Very well said, Sunny, and thank you so much. And sometimes it's very hard while we are in the journey of life, especially in the professional career. We just we just don't know, and we look for that connects with our soul and heart, and then that's when we are satisfied. And it takes sometimes people struggle to get there many years. Some get it as easy as it is, but definitely getting and be satisfied, and that's your calling. You attained your dream job, right? So I'm glad you've gotten there. The next question is for Ramona. If you had the opportunity to travel anywhere in the world, where would you go, Ramona?
Unmute yourself. We both got it.
I was laughing at you, and then it ended up happening to me too. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's such a pleasure to join you. Thank you, Nazira, for this invitation to be on this distinguished panel. It's an honor to be here with people who want to advance community, who want to advance social justice and equality, and most of all, love. To answer your question, if I could travel anywhere in the world right now, it would be to the continent of Africa. I have not gone there yet. And so I'm excited to go there in the near future as soon as COVID is over. So that's one place in the world that I have not traveled to that I'd like to go.
And it's interesting you say that, because I just recently saw Daniel's post on the entire continent of Africa and how he compared the different countries and how India fit in so easily and US fit in. So, I mean, it was much, much bigger. And he compared all these countries and still it was bigger. So definitely so much to look for your travel, Ramona. Definitely get that image from Daniel later. And so, Dr. Joel, my question to you is, what is one thing you wish your parents had said to you growing up?
Well, it's just, I guess my big passion has been history, and I wish I had learned more about history. Some of that was my issue. My dad was a teacher, so I'm sure he had a fire hose on me with information coming toward me, but I was kind of batting it off. But I guess I wish I had been exposed to some of the history that I'm learning now as I'm older.
Very nice. Okay, sounds good. Dr. Razdan, if you can also unmute yourself, if you could improve, and I'm sure you're already doing this, but I still wanted to ask you, if you could improve the world by doing one thing, what would you choose to do?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Once again, thank you so much for this opportunity. I have special ties with you because you're from a place called Dindigul, where Dindigul is south of India, and where we have set up a Gandhi and King Center. So I wanted to provide that background information introduction here for this young lady who's so modest, and she's a medical doctor too. So we are very thankful for this opportunity. But going back to your question, I know you've given 30 seconds. I think the most important thing I would say is what Dr. King said. Don't judge people by the color of the skin, but by their character and their achievements. That's the most important thing I'll do.
Very nice. And isn't that the hardest thing to do, Dr. Razdan? Not to
Absolutely.
judge. My
Absolutely.
gosh. And probably I want to hear more about it as we talk further. One of the toughest thing to do, I think it's the human nature itself, just the basic innate nature. How do we change that? But I think there are steps we can take, and that's why
Absolutely.
I have all of you to tell us how to do that. So, Avet, the question for you is, name one Indian dish you've had.
Oh boy. Well,
So no,
that's
I'm just kidding. But if you can tell us what is, because even if someone asked me of any African dish or the place that you're coming from, I wouldn't know. But tell us about a dish that your family makes for you and that you like.
well. Thank you for modifying it a little bit. Thank you. And first of all, I want to say I really am happy to be on this panel among great people here. And well, I do eat. I do go to a Nepalese restaurant here in Clarkston, and mostly they serve Indian food. But I wouldn't even remember the names of them. But in my home, we eat a lot of injera. I don't know if anybody knows it. That's
I've heard.
Ethiopian
Yes. Is that from
Ethiopian
Is that the
bread.
Ethiopian dish?
Yeah,
Oh my
and
gosh, it's like
we
Dr. Razdan, it's like dosa. Exactly like dosa. Go ahead, Avet.
yeah, and we use different sauces, and we are vegan in my family, so we eat a lot of lentils, like a lot of Indians do. We do eat a lot of like tofu, of course, and but I think my favorite would be this bean based sauce called shiro. It is like chickpeas grounded and spiced, and it's really awesome. If you have ever go to the Ethiopian or Eritrean restaurant, try it.
Very nice. And so I know a word from Ethiopia, obelesa. Obelesa? Obelesa is brother?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so a long time ago, I just remembered as you said, Njaro. So the next question, thank you, Avet. We'll definitely try that out. But before you leave this session, we'll make sure you know the name of one Indian dish for sure, okay? And now, Kavita, the question for you is, so if you could, who's someone you admire and why?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'll start with that. Being among all of us is a great opportunity and privilege for me. I really admire two people I would like to add. One is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and the other person is Periyar, whom we refer to as. His name is E.V. Ramasamy.
Okay, and can you tell us why?
E.V. Ramasamy, Periyar. Periyar is the person who has kind of commonalized the concept of social justice and self-respect for every Tamilian and Indian for that matter. So those are the two very, very important things which he spoke about years ago. And B.R. Ambedkar, as we all know, doctor has been always struggling for Dalits and women. And he's just not a father of our constitution, rather an Indian, a global leader for that matter, wherein he has very strongly put forth in a very easy way for us to understand about the equality, the cerebral equality that is required and what we are fighting for as women and as a society.
Very nice. Very well said, Kavita. Thank you. Sukhdeep, we've saved the last for the best. Tell us, if you had $1 million, what would you do?
That's a
I
great
think
question.
start a foundation. So invest the money to be able to grow it and give it back to the community in ways that we can truly help. For me, my passion is in education. And so constant fight towards closing the achievement gap and ensuring that everyone has access to a great school down the street from them.
Very nice, very well said. I used to work for the county, and I really gone into some of those schools, and it sometimes hurts that there's really not equal opportunities, for many. So some of these dialogues will help us understand that, and how can we create or help with some small steps that can become big and make huge impact. My question next is before I want to touch into the question, right? I want to discuss this, and please let me know. So, is it wrong if I ask someone, are you Black or are you African American? If we can distinguish, because this is a question that many have, Sunny, Ramona, Daniel, and Avet, and Dr. Joel. How can we address them by not offending, because that intent is not that, but we see so many language, all the academicians use African American, but I've had an adopted mom she said, I'm not an African American, I'm a Black. So how do we not offend? If one of you can tell me exactly, so the listeners are informed as well.
Well, I would like to take that question from a historical perspective, and then I'm sure Sunny and Daniel can add on to it. But when you look at the evolution of African Americans in the United States, it's really a process of us determining our own identity. And so we've gone through this process. I have great aunts. We started out calling ourselves colored. They used colored until the day they died. Then it evolved into Negro during the Marcus Garvey movement. Then during the Civil Rights movement, the term evolved to Afro-American, and then Black. And then during the 1980s, it evolved into African American. And I went to a conference, a history conference some years ago, and the term that was discussed then, that the scholars felt the term would go into Pan-African. And so it's just a matter, it's an evolutionary process, and every person, Black person or person of African descent, grew up with one term, and they may keep it and not necessarily be willing to incorporate another term. So it's just based on preference. I don't think that people really want to say, I don't think that question is absolutely necessary to call somebody. Ask them, do you want to be called Black or do you want to be called African American? What they want to be called is by their names. So so that's just my opinion or my understanding from a historical perspective.
Anyone else wants to add?
Yeah.
That makes a difference. Go ahead.
I think Sunny's going to want to chime in as well, but Ramona laid out probably the best academic case you could lay out, and I'll start where she left off, which is calling a person by their name. You know, I'm very fortunate to be able to trace my roots back directly to Barbados. My family was taken from Western Africa, and we were stopped at mostly on sugar plantations. So I think a lot of what we were able to do from study is trace it. But to Ramona's point, this has been a journey, you know, from 1619 to 2019. You know, we as a community have gone on this journey, this 400-year journey of an identity crisis. because there have been other groups that have labeled us. Ramona mentioned color. We were called much worse than that, which I won't repeat today. Now the new corporately acceptable term is people of color, and we're constantly being bundled up and recategorized. And as a Black man, unapologetically, I think I'll say two things really quickly. Number one, I think Ramona's absolutely right. We want to be referred to as who we are, because we understand in Atlanta alone, and it's my brother who I believe is from Ethiopia. Atlanta has one of the largest populations of African, Caribbean, Afro-Brazilian. You have so many cultures of our color, and that's really the diaspora. And I think that, what I would like to see, and I'll end my statement here, is for us to really understand how this could be a teachable moment. Because I think that if we as a community can understand the journey of us from where we originated from to where we are as Black Americans today, we would understand that it's not enough to categorize us, because while we may have direct roots to the Caribbean, we all know that many of our family is much more. I mean, I have family in Canada, I have family in Brazil, I have family all over the world. So I think it's really important for us to take that journey together. And the way you asked that question, I'd like to continue with you to help to expound upon that, in the future, so that we can all get there together. So yeah, thank you, Ramona. That was a great answer.
And I'm going to just close it out with both of them are correct. I agree, support the notion. And why is it necessary for us to go up and say, what are you? When we can say, who are you? I introduce myself as Sonny Slaughter. So I think if we normalize respect across a broader lens of not just how we look, I identify as a Black woman, but I am not offended if somebody says African American. I don't think it excludes my indigenous background, my Geechee Gullah background. But there are some offenses that we must, as individuals, internalize in how we engage other people. I think we engage individuals individually, and we don't think any culture, ethnicity is monolithic in their individual views.
Great, Sunny. And Dr. Joel, I also want to extend the same question to you for the reason that you have had, just because of your extensive travel and extensive networks that you have built along with co-authoring in your book. Do you ever feel that the jerky moment, that, oh my gosh, did I say that right or wrong? Or should I have addressed someone differently?
Well, as I'm from Canada originally, and I love Barbados, and all the things that Daniel was saying at different places. Coming from Canada, I was raised with not only a white consciousness but also a Canadian consciousness, and so I kind of have a different. My mind is wrapped around society and culture and everything in a different sort of way. Because where I come from, the pejorative is the drunken Indian down at the reservation. That was what kids were saying when I was a kid. And so, coming to U.S., I left home when I was 17, long-haired hippie, dope-smoking fool, hitchhiking all over North America. And so when I came down across the border into U.S., it was like, what the heck is going on down here? I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. I didn't know what questions to ask. And so then working with for 20 seasons, I was chaplain for the Bullets, the Wizards, and the NBA. And when I was 25 years of age, and that's, a lot of the players are of African descent. So long discussions, for 20 seasons, you can imagine the types of conversations I had with players, just about any player you can name. And so that really helped me to understand a little bit about from the perspective of someone of African descent. And then we ended up, Dr. Milton and myself, we created a Black History curriculum that's called Black History 365. And we discussed all kinds of different, how should we title this? And we just said it's easier to say Black History 365 than to try to incorporate everything and everyone. and that's the way we went with it. And so the curriculum starts in ancient Africa, ends in Canada, and has everything kind of timeline in between. And trying to understand, we did a whole thing on the N word also in our curriculum. So I'm getting a little long-winded, but I just wanted to respond in that way.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Avid, yes, please, I was coming to you next. Yes.
Thank you. And I just, first of all, I understand it's this a question. It's just a naive question, but it's just something that that actually happens in real life. So thank you for asking the question. So for me, as somebody who actually grew up in Africa and who came here, and I always get asked, my kids get asked to fill up a form, and they ask, sometimes you say, are you black? Or sometimes you say, are you African American? So I usually just tell them to put African American or just black is fine. But the question, it depends on who you are asking, who is asking the question, and the context of the question. So I think most people don't mind being called African American. I've had a lot of friends who are African Americans. They don't care being called African American. But there are some people who get who are also say, why am I being called African Americans while these others are not being called European Americans, or these others are not being called some other hyphenated name? So it's a kind of legitimate question. And also the word black is kind of interesting because now we hear a lot of words brown, but black is really a big, it's not like a spectrum, it's a big variation. So we have, in my own family, we have people who are very dark, people who are very light. So it just depends on the context. So it will come to me offensive if somebody who is a person who is from, let's say, a different continent, who's also black, asks me, are you black or African American? So it's really interesting because I've seen people who also are blacker than me who think they're not black. So I mean, I think we can definitely look at the world, and we need to usually be cautious about labeling people because our skin color does not really tell much about our personality. And in terms of identity, we have mixed identities. I mean, I'm Eritrean by national origin, and I'm also Ethiopian by culture. I'm American now, and I also have language identity. I have so much identities that I can name. So I think the most important thing, as somebody said it earlier, is to kind of before you ask that kind of question, try to get to know a little person more better. And then if you know the person, I think they would not be offended to kind of educate you about what is the appropriate word. But yeah, thank you for bringing this question, because right now we see it, and usually when it comes to racism, most racists don't care about if you are lighter, if you are darker, if you are, they don't care. They don't care if you're from India or you're from Barbados or you're from Canada. If you look black to them, you are, in terms of racists, they will still discriminate on you. So I think we need to understand that usually we have to be very careful about the way we ask it, but we also I just want to take this opportunity to also put it in a context. Thank you.
Very
again.
well said, Aved. Thank you so much. The whole thing about Chai and Chat is about educating and keeping people informed and asking questions which are really not right or wrong, but having a response that they feel much more better informed. So my next question is for Dr. Razdan, Subhash Razdan, about culture, right? Culture is like it carries an unparalleled weight in shaping how communities are perceived, right? And we just talked about even the different identities within the Black culture. And but sometimes what happens, Dr. Razdan, is because of that cultural complexity, sometimes it comes out that we want to be seen as from a single lens, right? And sometimes it comes out as whiteness. Whiteness is the mainstream, and because of that, we lose what we have, what we came with. For example, let's talk about how Indian Americans or South Asian Americans are represented even in movies, right? Slumdog Millionaires, one of the poverty-stricken idea was there. In Simpsons, the Apu character just had a slang, the Indian accent slang. Can you tell me if you think we are accurately represented in the mainstream? If you can unmute yourself.
I just did it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
When you say culture, you mean the overall salad bowl of United States? Is that what you're talking of? Or you're talking
so
about the
I'm
black
specifically
culture? Or
talking about, for now, when I'm asking you the question, I'm talking about specifically the South Asian culture.
wonderful. When I came to this country, I thought hamburgers were made of ham. And the second part I would like to mention about this culture and the gap, cultural gap. I was invited by a professor from Georgia State University, and I lived with him for about 3-4 months. He had met me in India, so he invited me. And you'll find this very interesting. So first few weeks, he thought I was going to be vegetarian or would not eat beef because I'm a Hindu from India, and therefore I'm not supposed to eat beef. So poor guy, he would make me eggs, omelet, and all that, but he would eat a steak himself, but would not give me beef, nothing to do with steak. So one day he asked me, what do you eat at the Georgia State cafeteria? Or, when you're there for lunch? I said, I eat hamburgers. So he said, you eat hamburgers? I said, yeah. You mean real hamburgers from McDonald's? I said, yeah. I said, but you eat beef then? I said, no, I eat ham. So this is the cultural gap I'm talking of when we come from there. But America has been beautiful. I think slowly and steadily we have assimilated well enough. And South Asian culture, when you talk about South Asian, I'm talking of the subcontinent of India. I think there is a good mix of sports, good mix of Bollywood culture. In fact, I saw a video recently of Will Smith dancing to an Indian tune. I don't know, have you seen that? Yeah, he's done an amazing, great job with dancing to a Bollywood movie, a Bollywood song. So, music has no boundaries, language. So, slowly and steadily, I'm hoping and praying that we will assimilate well in this the broader salad bowl of the United States. Now, I want to make one more statement here from my own experience. Now I'm going to let the secret out when I came here, but I came here in 1976. And when I came here, the politicians here could only identify two things, either black or white. That is 76. But now, forward to today, go forward now. Looking at today, it is very clear that we are now an international community. And so the times have changed. So we hopefully, this word, Black American, African American, Brown American, would be more coined like what Congressman John Lewis said, the beloved community. I don't know if you remember, Sonny, his favorite word was beloved community, which means all the communities, all lives matter. So I think, and then of course, with respect to South Asian culture, the Indian cuisine has been quite effective, just like the Chinese cuisine, So he went to a Nepalese place, Howard. Yes, Indian cuisine is also part of the culture. So at this moment of time, I can just say that yes, we should all try to weave ourselves into a very nice, happy, beloved community with intercultural connections.
Very well said. And in fact, any of you are welcome to chime in with the questions that I do ask any other panelists. So just because this is a dialogue and I don't want it to be Q&A responses, right? The reason I asked that question, Dr. Razdan, is because at least for me, till my 30s, I've never had interacted with a Black person at all. And so for me, how I had got portrayed about, not personal, but how the Black community was portrayed to me was through the media, right? And it scared me, to tell you the truth. And it might be for many communities even now, because they've not taken the step to cross that fine line to learn or extend a hand to the others. The reason I asked was because sometimes I feel it's not accurately portrayed on the mainstream about others when you want to learn about different cultures. So that's the reason I also asked. Go ahead, Dr. Subhash.
Just one explanation. The best example of intercultural scenario of United States is our Vice President Kamala Harris. She explains it all. You know, look at her background, look at her origin, look at her assimilation here, look at her, and now she is the first Black woman, first Asian woman, first Indian origin woman who's a vice president, number 2 position. So that's a very good example.
Nazira, I wanted to go back really quickly to something that you said. You learned about your lens of Black people came from the media. And I don't want us to miss that very important point, because most of people's lens comes from the media, some form of media or mediums. And I think that is why it's one of the reasons why communicating, which is a thing that I do. I do a thing called communicating across the cultures, because culture is such a broader word. Like, I'm from New Jersey, I say robe. You might say house coat. But you know, I was living in Alabama. So I think that you saw the media portrays Black people in such a negative light. And I spend a lot of time on television with the media. That is what happens when I go and I say, Yahamakallah, alhamdulillah. And I'm in a group of all white people. And I say, so who are you serving? Because we can't allow the media to be the medium for educating people out of what we see as racist views and ideologies and institutional practices. We've got to have more conversations, authentic conversations that hurt.
Definitely.
We're going to get hurt feelings and emotions but Black people have been the most maligned group of people across the culture and across race. And we have to change that.
Really quick, Danny. I know we have to move on to Sonny's point and the gentleman before with Kamala Harris, and to Sonny saying the media should not be the medium. After Barack Obama was elected president, the image of Black male perception increased by somewhere around 42 or 48% just off the election of Barack Obama alone. Now with Kamala Harris, with the way in which Black women globally have always been disenfranchised, Black women especially in the United States, and the image of Black women from the beginning of colonization and what we've seen in this country with to where we are today, I think we have a tremendous opportunity with the election of Vice President Harris to really work to reshape that narrative and that image.
Very well said, Daniel. So I think that's so you see the pros and cons of which has to be always balanced, even with the media. So the next question for me is for Sukhdeep, and then Dr. Joel, I'm coming to you after asking Sukhdeep this question. Is we are all here, especially the immigrants coming from other countries, is because United States is one of the best countries. I would still say that, and the reason we left our own countries to come here is because we thought there are opportunities, better opportunities, I would say, to flourish. And does that mean our own country doesn't provide that. No, it does, but we just felt like we might be having better opportunities, right? So as immigrants start coming in with different cultures, diversities, countries, Sukhdeep, of course, the United States has become this global melting point, right? And with the continents and most of us here with different languages, thoughts, perspectives, but we also hear, when in Rome, be a Roman. So is it right to say when in America, be an American? I mean, I don't know. You tell me. Or is it okay for me to be wearing my sari and be feeling comfortable that, hey, I am comfortable under my skin wearing a sari?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're getting to that place where I know when my family first immigrated, I'm a first generation American as well. And assimilation was what was required of us, right? We were told you have to you have to act white, and we're living in a white dominant culture. And so that was what we were taught, use the language of, make sure your English is proper so you seem American. But even things like taking lunch to school, right? We would take Indian food to school lunch because we wanted to seem more like the people around us. And I think we have now, or at least from what I'm seeing in schools, there's a shift towards culturally relevant pedagogy and also just cultural relativism in general, where people are now more proud to be and show who they're from, where they come from, what their background is, and there's more of an acceptance to that. And so from what I see is that we're coming back to, or moving towards a place where it's not hide where you come from, but rather share it and be proud of it, almost to the point where even there's a little bit of if you do try to take someone else's culture, there's now like pushback on that as well, where you have to respect everyone's culture and share your own and share your background. And so I think I think we are moving to a place where we really can accept and learn from each other, because that is what creates true diverse learning environments and learning environments and cultures where we can all thrive from.
Definitely. And I think it's referred to as a cultural inappropriation. Yeah. So, Joel, my next question to you is, so now at least for me, from the past few years, I'm hearing a lot of diversity, inclusion, and corporations in the business world, right? Which really didn't talk about all these wordings, didn't have a diversity statement on their website. So now you see most of these big corporations are like, even before COVID, the diversity statement comes up. And so what do you think, what are the expectations for corporations in addressing the systemic racism, or let me put it, to improve diversity within their organizations? Are they taking up quantifiable changes, or how is that going to be measured? And it's just not putting up a diversity statement on your website. Is that going to solve the problems about diversity, even in the business world?
Well, I think it's a start, because any corporation, when I work with corporations, my first question is, why did you call me? And now, in other words, is this a reactive situation or is this a proactive situation? And if it's reactive, that's fine. Let's understand why we're here at this spot. And if there's legal issues that they're scared of, or all these kind of, or backlash, then let's understand what we're dealing with before we start diving in. And one of the things that I try to incorporate in the understanding is the whole idea of curiosity. There is something called momentary curiosity, where we're just walking down the street. I can remember one time I was in Piccadilly Circus in London, and I saw a gentleman with a blue mohawk and tattoos all around up to his eyes. And frankly, I was curious. I just thought, wow, that's an interesting way, and I'd like to get to know this person. But then I moved on, and continued my journey around London. And I think that many times what happens, it's human nature. Okay, I've got to mind my P's and Q's. I've got to be aware from 9 to 5. And then my question is, what is happening at 5:01 all the way around to 8:59 the next day? And so it's momentary curiosity is good, but I'm looking at possibility of 24/7 curiosity. and to be able to have this motivation to just to learn, to kind of peek around the corner and say, what can I learn from this person, this situation, and even a bad situation. I know I was working with one agency in the government, and they were getting, I won't mention the agency, but they were getting just pounded with people saying, this is a racially insensitive place to work. And so what we did is we kind of stepped back and began to talk about how pain and water are very similar, that water goes down to the lowest common place, and pain is the same way. So that if there's conflict, many times it's like, oh, you're saying that because, and you can fill in the dots, the blank of, you're saying that because, and it's generally where the pain is in that person's life. And we were finding that a lot of situations that were being called, that were being brought up to in a legal sort of fashion, were because people were in pain. And so when we began to talk about how to be more sensitive and more aware, and to ask more open-ended questions, to take a look at time, tone, and tact, and these types of things, we found that the number of reports went way down, and people were actually communicating with each other on a whole different basis. And the whole atmosphere began to change as we began to implement some of these ideas. I know in my own journey, I didn't show this to you, but this is the Black History 365. It's backwards, but it's a textbook, and the whole journey in co-writing this, 2.5 years, 12, 14, 16-hour days. It was like Groundhog Day every day for 2.5 years almost. And it was just learning and understanding. And with my co-author, Dr. Milton, there's not any question you can bring up that he and I have not discussed in a very, very specific way, because I believe that when we become specific, we can become terrific. And a lot of people just gloss over things and say, oh, well, that's because, or that's, all these different reasons. But when we really start drilling down and we have the relationships, my wife and I are married, and we still disagree, but we disagree within the framework of commitment to each other. And that's kind of a loose illustration, I think, that in terms of friendships and relationships, that sometimes people, as soon as the topic of reparations or any should we tear the statues down, or these uncomfortable topics come up, people of white white complexion, Caucasians might say, well, we came over, from Ireland, and we were looked down on, and blah blah blah. And my parents had nothing to do with and immediately see the eyes glaze over on the person of African descent. Okay, I know I can't talk with this person about this on a deeper level. And so it becomes a situation, I think, a curiosity-driven or motivated life, I think, can help so much. It's like Augustine said back in the 4th century, he said, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Now, it doesn't preclude the need to be understood. It doesn't guarantee even that we will be understood. But I think it's a great way, it's a chronological sequence, that if I spend my time in my relationships of seeking to understand, and seeking to understand some more, and seeking to understand some more, then what happens is that then trust begins to build. And as trust builds and intimacy builds, and then we can begin to really work one-on-one in larger groups. But to respond specifically, in corporate America, I see more of a 9 to 5 awareness. And I don't see the 24/7 curiosity. But, got to start somewhere on a journey. Yeah. It's always a good place to start.
Definitely. Go ahead, Kavita. The next question also was for you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of maybe add to or ask Joel about it. Since I'm part of the corporate world and I'm still working from an employee perspective, right? We hear a lot of policy-related communication coming in from the corporate team regarding the diversity, right? Starting with the gender diversity. Now it is all about ethnicity diversity. But even though there are a lot of communication, and as you said, it is all about 9 to 5 is what it seems, and I would agree to that. But I still don't see, a plan to kind of execute to reach the target, or I'm not saying from the numbers part, but from achieving whatever goal you've set to do with all these diversity related programs. Maybe, as Susan earlier said, right, it is all about the and as Nazira said, it's about the media portrayal of various ethnic people. But having said that, yes, it is very important to draw a parallel to the Dalit community.
Kavita, you, I think we're getting a interruption in your question, but basically, I think while we get her back, Dr. Joel, her question was, do you think there are quantifiable changes that are being made, or just for namesake?
Well, I don't want to be too Pollyanna-ish about this. I think the reality is a lot is knee-jerk reaction to legal issues and fear out of being sued or having a bad situation. So even some of the proactivity that is involved is based on fear and based on whatever is driving it. It is always wonderful to be around folks that are proactive about this. Quantifiable, how do you peer into someone's heart and mind to determine how, is it 30% aware? Is it 90% aware? 0%, whatever. There were two authors that wrote a book called, two white authors, wrote a book called Black Image in the White Mind. And they were talking about media. And what they said in there, to get to your quantifiable part of this, is that they, on a continuum, that you have maybe 20% on one side where you can say someone is a downright bigot, racist. I mean, no question at all. You can measure it. It is racist. On the other side, they called it comity, COMITY, of harmony, where there are 20% of white people that are really seeking and yearning and desiring and actively moving in that direction of working together. But in between, the 60%, they said, that have a continuum trending one way or the other, that they said that there is this sense of, hey, you got your black president, what more do you want? You got this, you got what, all these different things, which can't be. I think the term racist has become so diluted in its original meaning, its true meaning, that sometimes even if someone asks a question, they're called racist. And I think that what they were saying is that 60% are kind of in this ambivalent territory in between. They don't know what to, I don't know if they've had the opportunity or something like that, but there's this area. And I run into it all the time with politicians, clergy, people in leadership positions. It's like, wow, that is so out of tune. In my mind, I'm thinking, but it's just, how do I make a gateway? What kind of gateway can I find with this individual to help deposit some ideas and plant some seeds of curiosity for this person? And that's my challenge as an individual, a white guy from Canada, is to, like the old story about the starfishes being saved from the ocean or something, thrown back in the ocean. Well, I helped with this person. And if we try to take a look at the whole picture, it can get overwhelming. It's like a giant hamburger. Back to the original illustration is where to take my first bite. And I just think we just start. We bloom where we're planted, and we do the best we can where we are. Sure. And so, is that quantifiable? I don't know. It's very difficult. And I see all the quantifiable measures, and I still wonder how quantifiable is that when you start.
So while Kavita joins us back, Daniel, I see your hand raised.
Yeah. I, first of all, Joel, after this pandemic, I'm coming to Canada to sit down with you, man, because
he's not in Canada right now. He's near DC.
I'm in Maryland.
I'm
gonna have to come see you, man. No, I worked with this issue with the NBA as well as the NFL. So after there was an incident that happened with the Atlanta Hawks under one of our general managers, and we created the first ever diversity and inclusion manager under a friend of mine in Zinga Shaw, and I was a part of that process. And also with the NFL, which I think was a little more disingenuous after the Colin Kaepernick incident, how they dealt with it. And what I will say to corporate America is that when it's expedient and profitable, diversity and inclusion matters, right? Which is to Dr. Joel's point about not just being focused from a 9 to 5 standpoint, because I'll tell you, at the end of the day, you have to look at what has happened in our country and why certain folks are doing it. Look, I wear Nikes. I buy Nikes for my kids. Nike did the right thing by getting Colin Kaepernick. But if you think for a minute that Nike didn't go into their boardroom and meet with folks and look at their profit margins on their decision making, then you're sadly mistaken. And we have to be willing to be fearless in corporate America by saying, even if this costs us, even if we lose a profit, if we're on the right side of history, that's what matters. Because what's happened too often in America, to Dr. Joel's point, when you're looking at what has happened and what has transpired, people are reacting. I'm in the family office space. After the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery situation, $534 million was committed to fighting racial injustices. These things have happened well before George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. But because we had to react at a moment where COVID-19 had us quarantined, we couldn't shut it off. We couldn't leave our homes. We couldn't go to live shows. We couldn't do the things that were in our regular process. We had to address an issue that we couldn't turn off. And that is the one thing that there's a book that came out several years ago called Everything But the Pause Button. And it was about how hip hop culture impacted white suburb kids. And the whole concept was that in the suburbs, you could hit the pause button, right? But in reality, the communities that are facing these challenges deal with it every day in every community at every socioeconomic level. So I think we have to really address corporate America in its genuine approach to not just having a diversity and inclusion position like they did with multiculturalism in the 90s, but they have to really say we're going to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem by having a long-term commitment.
Definitely.
Daniel, we do have to get to connect. Nazira, can you get us together?
Oh,
You
yes,
better check it out, as they
definitely.
say.
That's what Chai and Chat is all about. We want you to connect further and do all the good you can. So I see Awet raising his hand. Awet, 10 to 20 seconds, and I want to go to Dr. Ramona for her question.
Thank you. Well, I just want to, I agree with all the speakers, what they said, but I just want to add that I think what corporate America can help is, could help us in terms of reducing the damage that was already done by economic empowerment. That's the major thing. That what they need to do is they need to give raises to all their employees who have been marginalized by all the racism in the last 100 years or so. And corporate America need to help in terms of getting jobs to people of minorities or people of color. So I think the best way they could help marginalized communities is by economically empowering them.
Well said, Awet. Thank you so much. And in continuation of this discussion, Dr. Ramona, my question is, I know you are also a scholar in race and racism. I definitely want to talk to us and be clear about what do people mean when they say race, and what does racism actually mean, right? And what is it referring to? And then right after that, I want to ask other questions. You're on mute.
Yes, that's the challenge in the United States, is actually understanding the terms and not necessarily interchanging them incorrectly. Race is not real. It's not based on any biological determinant. It is a social and political construction. It was created originally to justify the institution of the enslavement of African people. You cannot enslave another group of people without figuring out how to justify it. And Europeans used every means in their toolbox, whether it was religion, society, economics, politics, government, everything, in order to create this idea of race in order to exploit people of African descent. So race evolved into a system called racism, which it perpetuates white supremacy, white domination, and white control. It is a very complex system. It is interwoven intricately into the American society. There is no aspect of American society that you can be in and it not be, it does not perpetuate racism. And so we have to understand the difference between racism and prejudice and bigotry. Racism is a system, it's structural, and it's very complex, whereas prejudice and bigotry are individual acts. It's not people who proclaim that something is racist may be saying that something is prejudice, but they also may be really racism as well. So we have to understand the difference. People of color cannot be racist, period, because they're not in control of a system. We can be bigoted, we can be prejudiced, but we cannot be racist. And so when we look at corporate America and businesses and their responsibility in creating systems, they must embrace the social responsibility. They must embrace social responsibility in order to deal with the systems of racism. And yes, it is a start, but we have to start somewhere. And it is up to corporations. So social responsibility in terms of businesses having the responsibility to contribute to the societies they live in. Racism and ending social and racist structures, as well as advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as dealing with environmental justice. All those things are part of social responsibility, and corporations have a responsibility in order to address the social challenges that happen in our U.S. society as well as our global society.
Wow, that was so much, Ramona, and thank you so much. That just makes it more clearer and understanding of some of the words we could use. One quick question for you, Ramona, and then I want to ask the others in together a question is, what privileges do you have that others don't? And what privileges do you not have that others have?
I think Awet had stated earlier, one of the things he was explaining, even though he didn't use this term, was intersectionality, about belonging to various different groups simultaneously. And he also talked about the diversity within the so-called African American community. Even though other people may identify Black people when they see them as Black, they might identify, like he stated, I'm Ethiopian American. I have this different identity. We know, as Daniel has explained, there are many different groups and cultures within our community: Caribbean, the various African groups, Southern, Northern, male, female, so many different identities. So in terms of my experience as an African American and what privileges I have, I can't deny I am a light-skinned young lady. I know that I had privileges as a light-skinned African American that maybe some of my darker sisters and brothers didn't have. I come from a middle-class family that provided me opportunities that other people who were from working or poor families did not have. I have an education. In fact, I have a PhD. So that gives me a caveat to tables that some people can't sit at. So there are many privileges that I have, whether it has to do with the way I look or whether it has to do with the credentials I bring to the table or either my experiences. I'm well traveled, so I understand different cultures and communities that other people don't have the opportunity to have. So as Dr. Joel was stating earlier about his experience coming in with a different understanding because of his experience being a Canadian with First Nations, his experience was much different coming into the America and looking at society from that viewpoint. So I do have, like he stated, I have experiences that are different that also privilege me in many ways in my experience in the United States.
Very good. Before I ask, I have a specific question for Sukhdeep, Dr. Subhash and Kavita. But before that, I just want to acknowledge Daniel is also a new dad. How's the baby going, Danielle? Can you very briefly touch upon and tell us the name and how is it going?
Oh, her name is Aaliyah, and I'm obviously a little rested. So shout out to my wife. But no, I mean it's as the father of three black boys and the journey I've taken over the last 16 years with them, it has heightened my awareness of the importance of just protecting black women. And I'll say this, and we'll talk again at some point. But my goddaughter is a survivor of human trafficking. So I come from a family where understanding the importance of protecting women and the integrity of who they have the potential to become. So I'm looking forward to the journey. Plus, I'm a girl dad, so she's gonna be spoiled.
Very good, and we congratulate you again
Thank you.
and your family. So, Kavita, I did have a question for you earlier, but I'm coming back to that question. This question is for all three of you, Sukhdeep, Kavita, and Subhash. And Dr. Subhash, I hope you don't mind me calling you Subhash. I usually go with Dr. Razdan. So, have you witnessed racism because you're an Asian in any community you were in?
Not in US so far, not in US, but yes, while I was growing up in India, I did my education in north of India, and I did face a lot of name calling because of the color, and they used to call me, bully me, saying short, fat, and black and ugly girl, and they use this term called Madrasi, they have no idea of where what Madras or Chennai is about, but then every South Indian is termed as Madrasi. So that's something which I've been I did face when I was in school, and along with that, the food, right? They used to call, you're all about the sambar, idli, dosa, so that's something which definitely I faced.
Right. Well, thank you, Kavita. And that was the question I was going to come to you. So I'm coming right after Sukhdeep and Subhash answer. Sukhdeep?
Yeah, so it's interesting. A couple of years ago, with the new push for people to be able to identify as a person of color and the new opportunities that are available, I was actually asked, "Are you a person of color?" And a lot of people don't identify Asians as a person of color, and so it's interesting where we feel like we're not in either group. Like, well, I'm not white, but I'm not. So if I'm not a person of color, kind of what am I? But we, after the September 11 terrorist attacks, my father and my family, most of us, I even wore a turban when I was younger. And so given that, there was a lot of racism that we faced after those attacks because folks just weren't educated and didn't know the reason behind what was happening, and the fact that the Sikh community was not engaged, but we were targeted and told to call terrorists, told to go back to our country. So definitely seen it and faced it that way. But we often get into this, I feel like the one thing that a trap we fall into is comparing our trauma to somebody else's. And it's we need to show up and then accept what we come from and who we are and all what we face as an individual, and not try to compete for, my community suffered more than your community type conversation.
Definitely, I understand. And I'll tell you the reason I'm asking this question. Subhash, how about you? I think 1976. I don't know how times were then, but then tell me, how have you ever faced racism against you?
Thank you. First of all, let's understand the foundation of this whole. We had a long discussion about diversity, and it has become very fashionable to use the word diversity. The real beginning of this came from Dr. Martin Luther King, and the Black community was in the forefront of civil rights movement. And because of that effort of civil rights, because of the efforts by organizations like NAACP, Urban League, there is the fraternities and the sororities, we all have benefited. So if we are going to say, no, the racism is only Black related, no, we were the beneficiaries of the efforts made by Dr. King and I. Having said that, I personally have been very fortunate not to face racism, but some occasionally, they would make fun of my accent, and but that was taken in the stride. But I have seen, though, many aspects of racism, and two good examples I'll give you. It'll take 30 seconds each. One was, if you remember, the baseball pitcher for Braves, John Rocker. He had made some racial remarks in New York in one of the Braves games. And so the Braves management got a little uptight about this because they started getting a lot of phone calls and so they had a sensitivity meeting how to deal with these remarks. So being a community leader, I was also invited in that Braves meeting. And while we were brainstorming how to deal with this, I just suddenly said, you know what? We have a Gandhi statue at the King Center. Why don't we make him do lawn mowing there so that he will understand Gandhi and King, and that means multicultural. And can you imagine? First of all, they all laughed. He said, "What is he talking about? Mowing the yard lawn in?" Then they said, "No, this is a very good idea." So he was assigned for 1 month, 3 weekends, to do lawn mowing at the King Center around the statue, around the King National Park. He did 1 weekend, but then by the time he was traded, so this was one case that I fully well remember it happened. And the other one is around that time, I'm again talking about 90s, there was a lot of tension between the Black community and the Korean communities. I think the Black community felt that the Koreans were doing business there, but not really dealing with them, not really mingling with them. Quietly they would make their wealth and then go and live in the suburbs. And then in the suburbs, they were driving their Mercedes Benzes. So their gripe was legitimate. So there also, Mayor Bill Campbell had a meeting. And in that meeting, again, the talk of sensitivity and all. So these things are there. It's only recently when the corporate America started getting conscious of these facts, then they started using diversity and so on. So I have seen the progress here. I think America is, thank God, after the recent elections, I think America is basically a great country, and we will all revert back to proper assimilation, intermingling. I don't agree with that. We want to be part of the melting pot because I don't want to melt, but I want to be in that salad bowl and enjoy myself with Ramona and Sunny and Joel and all of you. So,
Dr. Subhash, do you have a preference for the dressing?
I take it Indian chutney with it. Yeah.
Okay. The reason I asked one of this question was because we know how we feel, right? When someone is showing their discrimination again, and specifically because of our name or our accent or our color. And I just feel as a close ally or friends with the Black community, my adopted mom and dad are Blacks as well, that how the moms and women and men in the Black community face racism almost every day, right? I'm privileged because I don't have to tell my daughters to be safe when you go out there. But Black moms don't do that. The Black moms have to keep telling their daughters and son every day to be safe out there. Keep calling me. Don't do this. Don't rush. And don't say a word when the police, stops you. So it just feels I want to understand, because it would annoy me and anger me if someone was racist to me, because and I ran for office. I've been called a curry eater, so I know what it meant. I was called a devil. So I know how much of education that needs to be there. And just because I was a brown running in a majorly Caucasian community for office. So and that was the reason, guys, the Chai and Just Chat was started, just because of that reason. So because when we do face obstacles, we make sure that others don't face the same thing and we start to do some action steps, right? My question for Kavita when she was disconnected earlier was, Kavita, because as we are learning about the Black community, I want some of the things that we go through back home also to be sort of informational, right? So let's talk about colorism. You brought it up earlier that you said, hey, you know what, I've never been discriminated in US actually, but I've been discriminated in back home, which is India, your home country. So colorism is also, of course, you brought it up that it is a form of racism, right? And based on whether you're fair or white, is going to depend on whether you become successful, you have a good marriage, or you're going to get a good job, right? And actually, women start to go into bleaching their skin, and what we see in Bollywood is all that thin skin and beautiful white fairness ladies. Priyanka Chopra, I'm sure everyone knows her, used to sort of advocate for the Fair and Lovely cream. So Sunny, we used to have a cream, and it was a necessity of every home back in India, at least during my times there. Everybody would have that tube of cream, which is Fair and Lovely. Maybe it had some sort of a bleach in it, so when you put it as a cream, which we use as a conditioner or a moisturizer here, it would sort of show you a little bit fairer than you wear. And so that's how mindset we were raised. Don't sit in the sun for long, you'll become dark and no one will marry you. So can you talk about that? So I don't know if Sunny and Ramona and Daniel and Avet are curious to know that, or do you already know that?
Sure. So yeah, I've done that. I've applied tons of Fair and Lovely, but when I was growing up, and so as I started reading more and understanding and observing the surroundings of mine and how privileged I am when compared to my Dalit brothers and sisters. That is when I kind of stopped everything and I was embracing what I had. I have good education, which is a great privilege to have. I have the opportunity much more than what's available for the rest of the Dalit community back home, right? And I've never been put into an untouchability kind of a situation, which is extremely pathetic, if I have to say. And the kind of harassment is what I would say, right? The discrimination and harassment that the Dalit community undergoes back home is horrendous. It is again, they are discriminated by the color, the caste, the sexuality. Women from the Dalit community, they do not have the social currency that we have access to. And so that's something which everybody will have to kind of understand, learn about it, and that can only happen when they are kind of communicating, reading a lot. Like I said, right, Ambedkar and Periyar had put the ground for the economic reforms, the social reforms, by social justice, self-respect movement. And from an Ambedkar's point of view, the law, the untouchability law, the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Protection Act. So one side, we are kind of, the government is has taken the measure that they have, but right now it's the responsibility of all of us who have the privilege that we have to ensure that we support each other, and then just stop this discrimination and enable and allow others to grow as well, right, from a social and economic standpoint.
Sure. Thank you, Kavita. I know Joel has to leave in a few more minutes, so my next question is to him. And Avet, I did see your raised hand, but Kavita, also I want you and Sukhdeep to answer that. So when colorism is this much importance that's given back home, does that mean to say that whiteness means prosperity, success, happiness, and everything that we need? So I want you to think about that question. But Joel, I was going to ask in a later point with all the panelists about some of the misconceptions and how do we address it. So let me ask you this question. If it's a misconception, please let me know how it should be responded. So some of the questions that even the South Asian community has is, immigrants from other countries work hard to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. Why can't the Black community?
Wow. I have, I have developed a 10-year plan to take back the hair care and beauty industry from the South Koreans. And I have talked with a number of key individuals because I just see this as a wonderful opportunity, low-hanging fruit, to be able to bring the economic engine for bringing jobs and repairing the infrastructure of our inner cities. Through the black hair care and beauty industry. Anyway, that's beside the point, but maybe it's part of the point, is that my brother told me that he had he lived in Palos Verdes, California, and he had some South Koreans coming in and mowing his lawn and doing different things. And one gentleman, he asked him, he says, "What? Tell me a little bit about your family system and everything." He says, "Well, we're making money here. We're going to end up buying stores, and then we're all involved in the hair care and beauty industry in the African American community." And he says, "Once I get settled, then we have someone else come and do this." In other words, there was a whole thing that they were doing, and I don't really know what to say. I just, in talking with people in the African American black community, the hair care and beauty industry, I've talked to probably, the Dudleys, the Bonner brothers, all the different people in the black community who are in this particular industry. And to me, it's a conundrum. I see, I ask the question, why isn't this happening? And there are many layers to this, and there's the predatory lending that is happening in the cosmetology industry. There's some laws that were passed way back that allowed the South Korean community to bring hair in from India and other parts of the world, and so there's so many layers to this that need to be addressed. I just think that it's something that probably I'm not a very good person to ask that question to. Probably, this is something to the captains of industry in the black community to just to come together around this particular topic. And my belief is that Annie Malone, who was the first millionairess on her own right, the one who trained Madam C.J. Walker, I believe she is the person that to bring her legacy back, because she paved the way for Avon, for Mary Kay. She had over 75,000 women that were entrepreneurs at a very difficult time in the early 20s, late teens and early 20s. I think that she is the one to coalesce around her legacy to begin to build around this particular area. So that's my thought.
Sure.
I apologize. We have to jump to another panel discussion.
Yes. No, I know you have to leave. So if you have any quick closing comments, 10 to 15 seconds, and we appreciate your time here today, though.
I just, it's just such a joy to hear what the other perspectives. 2 ears, one mouth. I've learned so much more by listening than by speaking, and I'm very blessed and appreciate this time together. And I just want, if it's possible to get the contact information for everybody on this panel, I think we could be dangerous together somehow. I'm a solutionist. People protest in different ways. I protest by coming up with solutions for the kneeling in the NFL, for the hair care beauty industry, for education, these types of things. That's what drives me, because we can moan and complain and say this is that and why isn't this happening? And my whole approach is let's come up with solutions and let's we can moan and complain. Walter and I had 90 seconds where we would freak out about something, and then in the 91st second, now solutions. Let's come up with solutions. So that's my tribe. But I'd like to thank everybody on this panel.
We like solutions. I'll definitely connect you with everyone through their emails.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you or talk to you soon, Dr. Joel.
We had respect for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Avet, I know I had your hands raised, and Sunny, you also are comments.
I was going to speak on the colorism issue because I think it's in a way tied to, I believe it was Ramona who mentioned the history of in terms of how racism was used to justify slavery. And I think the same concept is one of the, and as you mentioned earlier, that I honestly, my perception was shaped about African Americans by media also until I got here. When I got here in the States, pretty much for the first couple of years, I did not really interact in terms of personally with African Americans. And I did not really, I still was afraid of personal. I mean, if I see an African American male, I used to be afraid because I used to think they're gangsters or whatnot. But I want to go back to also the colorism issue, because colorism, interestingly, is an ancient practice, because it's an old practice, and a lot of it has to do with colonialism. And even in our own country, sadly, people of darker complexion are discriminated, and they're called names, just like in India or just like in South Asia. And it is very sad because we are very extremely diverse even within our own families, but yet if somebody's a darker complexion, we call him names. Sometimes they don't even care that they're calling them. It becomes even a nickname. It's very sad that but especially for women, a lot of women try to lighten their faces and their, so that they would look more better or beautiful, in terms of, just like that's what they think. And a lot of it has to do with the same reason that slavery was used to demean African Americans or blacks, so that they could justify slavery. And that mentality was woven into colonialism, and the same tactics were used in South Africa, in many other places, where the people who were lighter complexion were placed on, at least hierarchically, in a higher level than those people who were of darker color. And I am not sure about the history of this in South Asia in general, but I have a good feeling that colonialism made it worse, or even had a lot to do with it.
Maybe we still have the colonial hangover. So Sunny, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that we were having a conversation earlier. You spoke about the conversation that we have with our children. And as a mom of 4, I have 2 girls and 2 boys. And I think we can't ever have a conversation about what happens in Black communities and in Black households without talking about the talk that we have with our children. My oldest son is going to be a Black man in a white coat. He has this, what they call good hair, where you can't tell. People always say, are you mixed with something? And, you know, we all are. But he has that long, wavy hair that folks are like, But that hair doesn't protect him when he's in the car driving somewhere. So I think the conversations that we have in our households are really important. Now, I am a federally certified law enforcement instructor with the Department of Homeland Security. That works up something. His father is a police officer. But when he in the car usually by himself. So we just have to make sure that he knows, just like all of my other children, you know, what to do. And in our communities, in Black communities all across America, we're always trying to figure out what to do and how I think you putting together this conversation is amazing, because we're always having Black and white conversations. And I think it's time for us to have conversations around culture and ethnicity and our experiences outside of just having that one conversation where Black people are talking about racism and we're not talking about colorism and all of the other issues that impact us as individuals and as communities. And what happens when corporate America says diversity? That's a good buzzword. And when George Floyd was murdered, and that actually wasn't new. Now, how it was done on camera, that was new. And the way that we all saw that, it impacted all of us. But it wasn't new to our communities. So I think all of the phone calls that I started to get, because I do HR compliance and writing policies, I ask people, what have you been doing? Don't ask me, well, what can we do? No, tell me what you've been doing. Because I happen to be connected to a lot of the major D&I folks at corporations all across the country. Black women are in these positions, Black men. But if you don't put any funding and action behind what you want to say, and Dr. Ramona talked about social responsibility. Well, all corporates, they have the CSR, the corporate social responsibility. So what have you been doing? Really? I think we just have to ask the question, and I'm really bold. Are you sure you want me? Because see, I'm the call you out kind of. No, we all the kumbaya. We've already done all of those things. Those things are old. Tell me what you're really going to do. And I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. You have some amazing experts on your panel, and these are the conversations that we need to have more of.
And you are an amazing person too. You are, if you have noticed, you are on the screen too, Sunny. The reason is because I've always noticed you as being authentic and really believe in what you are doing, and just not for the name's sake. So we appreciate you. Daniel, I'm coming to you right after this question to Sukhdeep, Subhash, and Kavita. So now that we've established that there is or has been or might be continuing colorism back home, and so that brings, and Avet sort of mentioned, maybe it's the colonialism or maybe it's the European civilization that ruled you guys, the other prejudices that you have back home. So that comes to the anti-Blackness mentality, right? And I would not be sitting here saying I would deny that, because I've had one of my, not my own uncle, but another uncle who keeps saying that, his daughter can marry anyone except Black or a couple of other identities. But for me, it was very hard for me because I was close with them, and it took me hard. I still haven't told him why I've stopped talking to him for the last 6 months, but I feel guilty of not being able to open the discussion. So tell me, Sukhdeep, Subhash, and Kavita, how do we talk to our own community, our parents, our uncles, and our aunties about not just white supremacy, but also anti-Black, addressing anti-Black racism? Kavita, Sukhdeep, and Subhash.
Yeah. So first of all, we'll have to kind of start the conversation in the first place, because in Indian families, generally we don't. It's a tradition that we don't oppose our elders. That is disrespectful. I think that is something that we'll have to break, and then start having those uncomfortable conversations and ask the question, why can my friend not come to our home? Why can my friend not have meal on the same plates that we have? Why can we not marry, from a family of my own friend or the community from where they come from, right? So what I would say is that it comes from, in India, caste is very structured. The caste system is extremely structured, and it all comes from Varnashram, right? So we know the source of it, but instead of abolishing that, what colonialism did is that it kind of made it more systematic and on the paper, right? So with being on the upper category of Varnashram, what has happened is that they've got the authority and power to discriminate the rest of the people, but without responsibility. When you have power and authority without responsibility, then it can go the way it has gone over the years. Colonialization did one positive thing, that is was giving access to education to all, irrespective of what caste they belong to, right? So previous to that, if you see, the education was only for the people who come from the upper caste, and they used to only speak the god's language, as they call the Sanskrit, right? And so education was forbidden for the rest of us. And eventually, once we started getting education, we had access to more information that was around us on what's happening right now, what has happened in the past, and what could transform in the future if we don't stop what's happening right now. So the divisive politics and the socio-political disbalance that's happened in the current regime or in the past as well, is something which we'll have to have a very open-hearted conversation with our families and friends, because that is something that has to be addressed. And the way it can be addressed is by acknowledging through communication, right? You have to talk to the people who are suffering. If you have no access to them, which is bogus, but at least go and read. People should go and read books by various Dalit leaders who have spoken about it, by the leaders of the Black community who have spoken about it. Today there are so many leaders who are talking about it. You have access to internet, and information is available abundantly. You cannot choose to read what you want to hear, but you have to choose to read, to understand, analyze, and implement, rather than just to make some comments in social media, or just to make some perception about people, and spreading that perception is not something which is recommended. You have to have an understanding of what's really happening on the ground with the people, and these are the real people who are facing the real issues. And
Sure.
this is something which we have to percolate down to everybody around us.
Sure. So Sukhdeep, thank you, Kavita. Sukhdeep and Subhash, how do we unlearn a conditioned anti-blackness in our communities? And this is the reason I'm asking is because some of these questions have been incorporated with what the registrants have asked us. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the only way to unlearn is you actually have to do the learning, right? And so a lot of the times folks just think it's once you yourself understand the information that's in front of you, you can kind of dismiss it. But learning is a process. And I think a lot of it is the exposure is not there and the conversation is not happening, which is what Kavita was saying, in people's homes. And so it's actually the responsibility probably of the future generations, of like the younger kids, that to bring it back to their homes and have conversations with it. It's happening in my family right now. Like we are sharing with our parents what it means with the Black Lives Matter protests. Like, why is Black Lives Matter different than All Lives Matter, and why until Black Lives Matter, all lives can't matter? And having those conversations with our parents and getting them to understand that and real conversations with data and to, like questions in my house that always come up is the bootstrapping question always comes up, and I'm really getting them to see specific examples of how our country was founded upon racism, and what that looks like today really is the only way to actually, and it's not one conversation. It has to be over time and multiple and constant, like when things come up in the news or media, unpacking them in your homes and just being really real about what the world looks like, and then how that translates even to our personal lives, right? So it's one thing to know outside, and then it's another thing to say, okay, now I know this, so what are the decisions that I teach my kids that that they, like, don't let them play with people that are darker, or there's colorism within our communities too. It exists within the Latinx community too, and so it exists everywhere. And so yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Is that your bird, Sukhdeep?
Oh, it's my dog. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Subhash?
Let's all agree with one thing, that there have been role models in the Black community yesterday, today, and they will be tomorrow also. So let's have no doubt about that part. What you should tell your uncle, tell him to sit with you in the living room and tell him to listen to jazz first.
Can I send him to you?
Okay. So once he listens to jazz, then once he gets a little used to that, then tell him, okay, now how about R&B? And then get him used to a little funk. If that doesn't help, tell him to sit in front of a basketball game and see what kind of role models we have had in Michael Jordan and all these Magic Johnson and so on. I mean, they're amazing folks. I mean, look at in Olympics. We all have been looking forward to watching track meets where blacks were always winning. What are these? This doesn't happen overnight. There is a culture there, a subculture there that we have to learn from. And plus we have to also teach our uncles and aunties and all that to have a little better understanding. As Sandeep was saying, she tries to do that. So these are some of the things we have to do, and I think I keep going back to King and Gandhi. There's a lot of reverence for King family for Gandhi, and because of that reverence, the King family at their King Center, they allowed our community to have a full life-size statue, which you mentioned earlier. Not only that, there is also a Gandhi room there. And I remember doing events when Mrs. Coretta Scott King and Christine Paris King would be the first person to be a host for our events and would be the last person to leave, even when we were still, along with the security and cleaning crew. So that has been the kind of connection. We need to keep talking about those things. And I do a little bit of my own bit, and that is how we created a King and Gandhi Center in your university in Dindigul, where Nazira is from. And that is where Dr. King and Coretta Scott King had visited in 1959. So we now, in a reciprocal basis, we have a King and Gandhi Center there. We're working on it. So these are some of the things we have to work on. And of course, this whole life is a continuum. So slowly and steadily, we will come to that famous term, the beloved community, all of them, red, yellow, and so on. And let's hope for that.
Yeah, I can bet you my kid who's 13 years old, she says, like, you guys are still talking about race? Like, what's wrong with you all? Like, I mean, we don't see color among our friends, where they come from. We're all friends. So I wish we'll get to that stage.
I just want to add one thing. During the course of the discussion, we talked about diversity and corporations hustling to get diversity going. It's not just, it's a wide spectrum. Even the poor whites are also racist in many respects, because they have felt many times that brown community and black community, they're going to dislodge them from their businesses or from their jobs. So there is that economic aspect also. So it's a multi-dimensional issue.
Definitely.
And hopefully, we'll all, I think, and Sunny said, it goes back to education. So as we get more and more educated, as we get more and more enjoying the chutney in that salad bowl, I think things will get better.
Definitely. So now Avet knows about chutney. So I'm going to ask him one Indian dish he likes in the later part. Avet, I'm coming to you soon. Daniel, let's touch base upon, continuing to what Dr. Subhash just said, the influence of the Black community or the Black leaders or, the key renowned people in the past or currently with the brown community, right? We usually, as the broader community just knows only Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi, but there are several other instances that has shown that the relationship between South Asians and African Americans has been strong, and they've been standing with each other for a century. So let me just quote this one, and then I'll let you answer. Is in one of the surveys that was done way back, even before India got independence, 87.8% of 10,000 Black respondents said yes to this question. This was before even India got independence. And the question that was asked of them was, do you believe that India should consider for her rights and her liberty now? So imagine almost 90% of African Americans said yes, just before even independence. So it looks like there was good connections going on. Do you want to touch upon that, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a student of history. I modeled my book nationalism without compassion after the Gandhi and King influence that predominantly that King had from Gandhi. But Black dreams of Indian liberation has always been something that, from the early civil rights movement, the Black community modeled. You look at Bayard Rustin, who was the organizer of the 1963 March on Washington, and how he studied the Indian liberation movement. And that's why I kind of opened this conversation by talking about history. When we dive deeper into history, imagine if we taught Black history outside of Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. We would dive into the Indian liberation movement. We would talk about how South Asian. Let's be honest. I'll give a couple examples. Look at what the American civil rights laws that had been passed through the civil rights movement and the civil rights acts that were passed, what it did for immigration. When you look at how immigration was set up on the back, and this is to take nothing away from the South Asian community, but without the Civil Rights Act, we may not have had the Immigration Act. We may not have had many of those policies that were in place. There are examples after examples after examples where if we look historically, we see that there's an intersection in what liberation actually meant, what we had to go through. When you look at how Africa was colonized, and you look at the blueprint, no pun intended, but what we see with systematic racism and what we see, and I'm so thankful that Dr. Ramona broke it down that way between prejudice, bigotry, and racism, the system of racism. Now, I live in the South. We see Confederate flags all the time, but I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, right? Systematic racism and institutional racism in the North is much more potent than in the South. And I'm not saying that in a comparison to say that one is better or stronger than the other, as much as I'm trying to get people to understand that they think just because of your demographic, there's a much different struggle, right? And I think that when you look and study the civil rights movement, there is no way we can really measure the civil rights movement without looking at the parallels that happened with Indian liberation movement. And I think it's important for us to understand that, to talk, again, we can't limit ourselves to slavery and Dr. King, right? What happened from slavery to Reconstruction to the Jim Crow era? You have Indian liberators that worked, and South Asian leaders that looked at the Jim Crow era and fought from 51 to 64, that fought consistently and unapologetically. We don't know their names, right? And that's the challenge when a young South Asian man, a boy or girl, does not know the connectivity between their culture and their ancestors and the connectivity of the civil and human rights movement, not just the Montgomery bus boycott, not just the Edmund Pettus Bridge, not just Emmett Till. When we can start telling the stories of the individuals that helped in the struggle and in the fight, I think it's important. And I'll close my statement with this. We talked a lot about, and I think it was Sonny who mentioned the stories and the way in which we have to raise our Black children. That needs to be, I think, taught. The way in which Black parents in America have to raise our children to understand and how to navigate, whether they are light-skinned or dark-skinned, tall or short. It doesn't matter, because we all get to a point where we reach a certain space of economic success or career success, and we think that we're above the fray until we encounter that space and it's just us and the situation. I just watched the Black Messiah. What is Judas and the Black Messiah with my 16-year-old. And I had to use it as a teachable moment with the Black Panther Party, what they stood for, and how much the FBI under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover hated this idea of Black liberation. And at the end of that movie, my son asked me one question. He said, "Dad, am I a threat?" And this is my 16-year-old son that in 2 years will be an 18-year-old voting man, right? And our children are not naive to the struggles of this day, which is exactly why. And the sister that talked earlier is Sudeep. Like, she brought up so many good points about this generational space and how we communicate with our parents and our elders. If we're not building bridges generationally, then I don't see how our democracy survives.
Very well said. And then Daniel, to your point, I do want to, have you watched Mississippi Masala
No, I have
by
not.
Meera Nair? Oh, that's something you should watch. This is way
So
back,
you
for
gotta
20 years.
you gotta send that to me. I got
Yeah.
I've got time.
Yeah, so it's Meera Nair. She's the director, and I think I'm not sure about the producer, but she talks about an a relationship between a Black and an Indian woman, and which I'm sure in the South Asian community was not accepted well 20 years ago, and maybe it is right now. But Kavita, you should look up the Dalit Panthers formed in the state of Maharashtra in 1970, and it was aligned with the Black Panthers that was formed in the US. So just so many similarities that has happened in our history between the Black community and the South Asian community. And what I want to do is, I know we are coming almost to a close, but before we end and coming to a closing statements, I definitely wanted to touch base upon. I want to discuss the hope for change. What is it that we can do? And you all can mention that in your closing statements, but also about this idea about model minority myth. So, Ramona, I'm sure you've heard that Asians are sort of put in this model minority myth. So again, it's a discrimination and a practice, because to say, hey, look at your counterpart, they're doing so well, why can't you? So again, it was created just so that the discrimination is continuously alive, or racism is continuously existing. But Abed, my question to you is, these are some questions that some of the Asian American community do ask, so one of the questions is, how can non-Black people become better allies to the Black community and their struggle for racial equality?
Thank you. And well, I think one thing is understanding history. I think so many speakers mentioned this. One thing is explaining, just like as Daniel was saying, explaining how African Americans fought for all our rights. It doesn't matter if you are any race. If it wasn't for African Americans fighting, I personally believe I would not be here. That's just me.
No, that's true. That's completely true. That's what I tell all in my South Asian community. If it was not for the Black people, we would still be sitting in the back bench. So yeah, no, that's absolutely, and you don't have to be apologetic about it. And even Daniel, you don't have to be apologetic about it. That South Asian, of course, that's the fact and that's the truth. Go ahead, Abid.
And knowing the history would help them a lot in terms of appreciating the role of that African Americans plays. That's one. The other thing is, I think regardless where we come from, we need to understand that now our destiny is entangled together. We are living here in America. It doesn't matter where we came from. And we have to fight discrimination of any member of our society, regardless who is doing the discrimination also. So we need to start within our own person, within our own families. Just like you mentioned earlier, I do have, I've had some conversations with my own family members who tend to look not in a respectful way towards African Americans, for instance, just like you said about not wanting to marry. But the sad thing is we are all in the same boat right now. So our destiny is together. We need to continue fighting together. And we need to also know that we have allies from even if from Caucasian communities. Martin Luther King would have not been able to win the struggle if it wasn't also for so many allies. So we definitely need to believe that we need to build alliance of each other. And last but not least, I just want to mention this. So when you go back in history, we tend to be pick and choose. But if you want to go back 1,000 or 2,000, 3,000 years ago, I think most of us, almost all of us, including the Caucasians, we are all African diaspora. We all came from Africa. It just depends when we came from Africa. So we need to realize that, and we need to confront or face people within our own self. First, I personally would question myself: have I ever been bigoted about certain things? And then I go to my family, then to my community, and we need to continue educating each other that that we cannot use parameters that were built in a couple of hundred years ago by people who intentionally wanted to divide us into so that they can conquer us. And we don't need to continue that bad history. So we need to learn from each other, from our shared and great moments. And particularly, we need to appreciate and be thankful to African Americans for all the fighting that they did for us. So, that's the only way that we have been able to now be here and call ourselves Americans. So I think Clarkston is a very model example. We have people from over 50 or 60 countries or nationalities, and we are learning more about each other, starting from food, just so
We're
at the
going to
end of the
make some
day.
recommendations of Indian restaurants out there, Aved.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, we have a good Nepali restaurant. So if you happen to be around here, I'm
Oh,
pretty
good,
sure you
yeah.
will enjoy it.
Definitely. We're gonna recommend
Yeah,
it.
I think there are many. These are also another thing we need to be thankful. So people like you and all the speakers for really getting the conversation going.
Definitely. Thank you, Aved. We're still coming back to you. Ramona, these are some questions that the South Asian community asks, right? And I want you all to address it. And these are real questions, right? So sometimes the questions are, I just don't agree with this routing. And I mean, yeah, BLM is fine, but then I don't agree to this routing and lighting. How does that help your community? And then the other question, Sunny, that I want you to think about is what about the black on black crime? So that's some questions that the community asks from our community. And then also about, hey, how come we never see the white man allyship in uniting black communities with others? Go ahead, Ramona.
Yes, that's a myth in terms of Black Lives Matter. We talked about it earlier. Someone on this panel brought it up about the media and the image of Black people in the media. Black people have always challenged power. And when we challenge power, there are certain images that seem to always arise in order to delegitimize our movements. And so we know, as Awet has eloquently stated, that it is African Americans that make America live up to its ideals. And that our movements have influenced the rise and success of other groups of people beyond African Americans. And so if we want to look at the movements, African American movements for social change, and if we want to use the media as our main means of education, then we must be critical of what we view. That's the main thing that we need to know, that we need to find other ways to educate ourselves on the movement. That is a myth to believe that the Black Lives Movement is violent and that it's destructive. In fact, it has been proven that some groups have infiltrated those movements to create that type of image. So that's the answer that I would have to that question. And I do want to say something to the question that you had stated to Sunny. Can you repeat that question again?
What about black on black crime?
Yes, black on black crime. That's a myth too. If you look at any community, and it's been proven, it's in research, that crime against groups of people are mostly perpetuated by those groups of people. So most people who are victims of white violence or white crimes, they've been perpetuated by white people. Same thing with African Americans, same thing with other groups of people. So that's a myth too. So all these myths that are perpetuated by the media, we have to begin to tear down those myths by educating our communities and showing the facts, and recognizing that there's no such thing as alternative facts.
Very, very well said, Sunny, and thank you, Ramona. Your words are really making an impact. So Asian Americans encounter racism too. Why should we support Black communities when we have our own to worry about? And this is again a perception or other questions that are brought out.
Well, so first, let me say thank you, Ramona, for handling that cleanup for me on aisle 6 about those alternative facts. So the Black on Black crime, when you think about criminal behavior, this is the law enforcement hat with the data. So when you think about criminal behavior, you can't just think about the false facts of the behavior without thinking about the process and the response that is institutionalized in racism. So the criminality placed on Black people more than any other race. We talk about Black and brown Latinx, the most criminalized individuals anywhere in the world happen to be people that look like me. That's what the data says. So when people are getting funding, let them put on the other hat, when people are getting funding and they are using the data, they are using the data for people that look like me so they can get the funding to address the oppressions for other people that don't look like me. I hope all of y'all got that. So use us. Go, Daniel.
No, please. I'm gonna wait till you finish.
Use us for the numbers and the funding, but don't have solutions for our issues for which we have been falsely criminalized. Now, I'm not saying that Black people don't commit crimes every day, but so do other people. It's the process on the back end that makes us look violent, that makes us look unruly, uncouth is another word. That's the blind side, BS.
Definitely. And we haven't even touched base, and because of lack of time, we haven't even touched base on mass incarceration and all that. So that's definitely should be a part
and
of
that is my whole spiel, because I did that for the state of Black health and the whole mass incarceration. And I worked, and I was on the HR side as the external compliance officer for one of the largest reentry programs in the United States, funded by the government. So programs, process, all of that stuff. And as far as when people say, well, we don't want to help Black communities, that's your other question. Well, why are we worried about helping them? And, we have to help ourselves, because Black people help everybody. Not only what has happened previously, but anytime there is an issue that bucks up against injustice, you will find Black people, regardless of how they identify, you will find us in the mix to address everybody's injustice, because we understand the experiences and the intersectional experiences of what injustice looks like. So we don't ask other people to help us. They don't usually ask us to jump in, but we always do. It's because that's what Black people by nature do. We come to the rescue
very well
of
said.
Other people.
Very well said,
We
Daniel.
come to the rescue, and we take care of our own stuff too. But we're going to fight because it's all that we know, because we are fighting the injustice that touches everyone like a blanket. We don't leave nobody out, even when they don't count us in.
Sounds very, very well said, Sunny. And thank you for the answers. And the reasons I ask those questions is because those are some of the perceptions or people have that we should continue to address. Daniel, did you have any comment?
Yes, real quick. And obviously I got my little one with me.
Aliyah? Is that?
Yeah, Aliyah. She's.
Can we see Aliyah before you start talking? We want to see
This is my baby girl.
she's so cute.
And we sleep that soundly.
So no, what I wanted to say, and one reason I think it's important to say this is the myth of not only black folks and crime, but also fatherhood. The FBI released data on fatherhood and on crime, and both of those dispelled myths that black folks overwhelmingly commit crimes against each other more than white folks or Hispanic. Those numbers are actually a lot closer than you would think. Gun violence, and when you segment it, yes, it changes based on the crime, but to say that we're just overly criminalize each other is a total myth. Black fathers, amongst FBI data also, and the Department of Health has also stated that even when separated from a black household, black fathers are overwhelmingly continuously engaged with their children. But we've bought into this narrative, and it's partly because when 6 people own the media in the world, and that narrative is taken down, we may think we have options, but when you have 6 individuals that are enormously wealthy that control narratives and that put the image out. I remember growing up in the 90s, the brother Awet said earlier, let's be honest. He said he came over here and he was afraid of the image of some black folks that he was portrayed. And I grew up in the 90s. And when Cops came on and all those series that came out, it perpetuated the image of a black criminal. And that's not new. So I just want to close this statement by saying, back to what Ramona said earlier, this idea that racism in the system that was put in place is not still alive and well is a narrative that we should really decry. Because if you look at the insurrection on January the 6th, you tell me what is the difference between individuals that were not black, that were not Muslim, that were not brown, that totally destroyed our nation's capital, broke buildings, took lives, literally stole information, and you show me a Black Lives Matter movement where something along that lines happened. And yes, has there been challenges? Has cars been put on fire? Has things happened? But let's not get distracted by what is really, really happening and going on. And the fact that many of these, as it was stated, have been infiltrated by outside organizations. We're not going to allow that to rob the narrative anymore. It was one of my favorite authors, James Baldwin, once said that we gave you the rainbow, the fire next time. And what he meant by that wasn't about being destructive or being criminal. He was saying, how long do we have to come in peace to explain our narrative, to say the struggles we face, before we have to show you that we're not going to allow you to take our children, our wives, our husbands, our family members, or our communities another day. And we have to do it by being more aggressive, by building allies and coalitions. But more than anything else, we have to weaponize education and teach our communities that which they don't know.
Definitely, Daniel, thank you so much for that comment. Dr. Subhash, let's go. I know usually I say 2 hours, but the conversation continues and it never feels like it can end because it's something that needs to continue, such dialogues. Dr. Subhash, let's go for the closing comments from each one of you. What I would also like you to address in these closing comments briefly is also how important is it for us to stand in solidarity with the Black communities, and how can we show that, but also add it on to your and how does, also think about the closing comments from each one of you. How does 50 years from now look like?
Okay. My closing comment would be pretty much what my opening comment was. But before I get to that, I want to give you one good example of a family friend of mine. He had 3 daughters, and this is a true story, and this is supporting the myth that Dr. Ramona mentioned about. He had 3 daughters. One daughter married a white American, another daughter married an Indian American, and a third daughter married the Black American. This friend of mine got stricken by Alzheimer and Parkinson combination, and had a lot of problems. And do you know, and this is a very touching story, the person who really took care of the older couple, the parents-in-law, it was the Black gentleman. So, and you would never have believed that this can happen, but this is what has happened. The Indian American son-in-law did a disappearing act. The white American guy was young man, African American. That is one thing. But I do want I want to make one good I have a good observation. I think the churches need to play an important role in making the family nucleus a very stable unit. When we get into a single parenting situation, it compounds the problem. So, as a closing, I would like to make that. Finally, I make my closing statement, which was my opening statement, that the Black community has been in the forefront for civil rights movement, and it was not just for the Black community; it's for all of us. And we Browns have benefited as much as anybody else. So, thank you so much for this opportunity. And with this comment, I'd like to say goodbye because I have to go somewhere.
Sounds
So
good.
thank you
so
again for
much.
doing this.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, Dr. Subhash. Thank you. Dr. Ramona, thank you for joining us. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Ramona.
Hi, I just want to say thank you, Nazira, for putting together this very impactful and valuable discussion. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with such a wide range of people with a wide range of ideas and solutions. I would love to connect with everybody, of course, and you can find more information about me on ramonahouston.com. And please do connect with me. And I hope you'll connect us as well, Nazira. And you can also check out my podcast, The Empowerment Zone, which we talk about issues of empowerment in Black and Brown communities. We've covered so much today. We've covered racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Colorism,
prejudice, colorism, colonialism, intersectionality, whiteness, anti-Blackness, culture. And so, as what I hope the audience comes away with is that this is very complex issue, and it's not going to be solved overnight. But it can be solved if everyone decides to play their part, right? And there are primarily three solutions I advise, which many of us have discussed today. And that's one, that we have to make the decision that we want to make an impact, right? We have to make a decision that we want to be anti-racist. We have to make a decision that we want to address the challenges within our own culture and communities that perpetuate racism and all the different isms in our communities. Second, we've got to educate. Soup talked about that. Caritha talked about that. The fact that within our own cultures and communities, we have these power dynamics where we have to be careful in how we address our elders, if you will, about their prejudices and bigotry. But that doesn't mean we can't have those conversations. And so we have to not only seek knowledge for ourselves, but share the education that we receive with others. And then lastly, we've got to act. We've got to act on an individual basis on what we're going to do individually to address the issues in our community. And we need to act in terms of our networks and all the organizations and institutions we belong to in order to address issues. And like Dr. Razdan stated, family is so important. My father always said that family is the most important and the most valuable institution in the world. And we can make a change if we decide that we're going to create another narrative within our families. So I think the solutions have all been discussed here. This discussion is not going to stop here, but what does start here is that we have to be the change that we want to be, and that we want to see. And so that's how I would end my final notes, is just be the change.
Definitely. And you famously quoted Gandhi's quote as well, be the change you want to see in the world. So Sukhdeep, you next, please.
Yeah, thank you all so much for having us here, and Nazira, thank you for organizing this. You know, the board that I sit on is the This Fund Network, and it's a nonprofit that helps raise funds for sick causes, but we also are working to help raise funds for causes at large in our community that are affected. And so we've done some work with some mental health organizations that are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement as well. And I just want to, express that it is our role, every single one of us individually, to demonstrate the need for every individual to support this. And so, whatever we can do to create awareness using our own social media or anything that's at our fingertips, even if it's just conversations within our households or with our kids. In education came up so much, and it's so incredibly important to teach anti-racism in schools and teach the true history of the creation of our country. And the only way those things will happen is if we as a community push our education system to make sure that actually occurs. So anyway, I'm grateful for everyone listening today on a Sunday morning. And thank you, Nazira, for letting us be here today and
Thank
letting me
you.
represent the
Yeah,
community.
thank you all, first of all, for all your time and your passion that you bring. Awet, next to you, please, your closing comments. Or maybe I'll go ahead.
Yes, well, thank you again. I think I definitely might be repeating some of the things that I already said. I feel like there were so many issues that I think we could talk for months about this, and but the bottom line, I think what my take will be again to continue questioning ourselves and trying to see if there were moments that we ourselves were also bigoted, and we also sometimes we tend, without realizing it, of course. I know most of us here, we are definitely concerned and sincere and passionate about social justice in general. And I say that we definitely need to also educate our own family members. It definitely it can always go both ways, and this is not just racism or something. It's not just about the others who are discriminating on us. There are certain things that we also perpetuate ourselves. I just want to give you one example. So historically, in our country, Italians were the colonizers, and people would stand up and give up their chair or their seat for Italians. So now, unfortunately, a lot of our elders have this ingrained in their brain. So even if they see a younger white guy, they would respect him. And there is nothing wrong with respecting people, but they would do it with no virtues, with no reason, more than they would respect another accomplished person of color or another accomplished somebody who is from their own culture, from their own country. So we definitely need to liberate our own selves, and we need to also help liberate our own family members. There are a lot of practices that we continue, like somebody mentioned about hair. I definitely, I could tell the difference between my own children's hair. Some of them have, darker or kinky hair, or I do have kinky hair myself. So some of my kids, they took after their mom, but they if they start speaking about it, I'll tell them that's actually not really nice thing to say. We all have beautiful hair or something like that. But anyway, I think we definitely need to dispel a lot of myth within our own communities ourselves and educate other cultures. And finally, I just want to say we definitely need to understand that so many people had to fight for our rights and for our freedoms to be to a point where we can actually be on Facebook or on YouTube or on live on Google Meet, and we could actually talk about these subjects freely, which was not available to so many people a few years, probably about 50 years ago. So, well, thank you again for doing this, and the conversation continues. And if you ever happen to be in Clarkston, feel free to reach out to me, or just enjoy the different foods that we have here in Clarkston, and learn about the different cultures that we have here in Clarkston. And I think we are going to that way. We are actually getting a better society, and we are actually going towards, as Dr. Subhash say, we are going towards that beloved community. So thank you, everybody, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Aware. Thank you so much for your knowledge, wisdom, and time. Sunny?
Sorry about that. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with all of you. Amazing, amazing, amazing speakers, presenters, and background. Wow. Azir, you really put together a great panel, and I'm so appreciative to be included.
Sunny, can I interrupt if I may for 1 second? And I wanted to keep your thoughts because I think Daniel's feed is dying or something. So let me get to Daniel and then come right back to you. I just want to don't lose him for the closing comments. Go ahead, Daniel. Sunny, I'm coming right back to you right after Daniel.
Thank you, and Sunny, we should definitely connect. And Nazir, I really, really appreciate it. To all the panelists, thank you all for everything. I'll just leave you with 2 quotes. One I always give, which is Dr. King once said, "The true measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy." None of these conversations are going to be easy, but they're necessary. To the international community, it's solidarity is not an act of charity; it's an act of unity. And I would just encourage everyone to learn so that we can grow and build together. These conversations may be difficult, they may be hard, they may be challenging. But if you're like me, if you're like Sunny, who has a husband that's in law enforcement, if you're an activist, if you're a leader, if you're just someone that is the gatekeeper of your household, all of us play a role in our faith, in our religion, in our in our positions. And I just encourage everyone to start that conversation where you are. I would not be where I am today if I didn't have mentors that told me what I wanted to hear and also what I needed to hear. But more important, those who were around me that were willing to correct me when I was wrong. So I would ask and encourage everyone to do 1 of 2 things. One, either get an accountability partner, someone that you can be open and honest with, so that when you have tough questions, you don't have to be passive about it. You can really have a trustworthy person that's willing to be available to you so that you can learn and grow and not assume and make the wrong decision. And then secondly, I would encourage everyone to study, to just take time. Our children have access to Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everything. They're gonna learn it if we don't discuss it. If you're not willing to have conversations, fearless conversations with your children, my fear is that what we tolerate today becomes tomorrow's standard. So if we don't tolerate an uneducated community, it won't be tomorrow's standard. If we are bold, fearless about what we share today, they'll be better tomorrow. So thank you so much, and God bless you to everyone. And I look forward to extending this conversation at some point.
Definitely, Daniel. Thank you for joining us, and best wishes as a new dad again. Sunny, go ahead.
I was just going to give almost similar awareness. It's really important that we have the right information. So not only should we change the narrative, but we also need to challenge the existing narrative with the facts and the truth. And accountability is really big. Self-accountability, accountability for where you have influence and where you have a voice. Allyship is really important, but you can't be an ally just in the face when somebody else is not in the room. You have to be an ally. You have to speak up. You have to say things, not just because the person is there, but when they're absent. We all need to be present for others in a way that's authentic and truthful and honest. And then, as Ramona has said, and everyone else, we just need to take actions. We need to not just talk about the things that we want. We need to be about the business of making the change, and also just be the change that we want to see. We need to do things. So these are great conversations. I really appreciate that. But what we do after this is what really matters. We have to do something after this. So all of your listeners, all of us, we have talked about coming together again, connecting. If we actually don't make that happen, then so much will be lost, because this is a great team of individuals that you have assembled, and I'm grateful and thankful to be a part of it.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much,
Nazira, for
Sunny.
thinking of
Thank
me.
you. Thank you, Sunny. Kavita, how about you?
Thank you very much, Nazira, for this opportunity. I've just learned so much by just listening to all of you all. Many new things, and many questions that I had within my own selves on how to address it or how to approach things. Thank you very much for that. And just would like to add on. My son, 8-year-old, he was just doing a project and on the Black history, and then I was just thinking that he would pick up either Martin Luther King Jr. or Barack Obama, but he picked up Thurgood Marshall. And that is where I started reading about Thurgood Marshall, and I was like, okay, fine. So there have been many leaders, there are many leaders, and there will be many more leaders to come. It's just that we have to equip ourselves with education as a tool to connect between each other, and then learn and be advocate of each other. So I was reading a book where recently, the early Indians by Tony Joseph. If you actually read that book, that is when I realized that I have the DNA of the first generation that came in from Africa and spread across the world. And near Madurai, it's the A1 DNA which was found, that the first person who actually left Africa came into India, and that's the DNA which is very, very close to my home. And I was like, if we kind of just take a step back and look at ourselves, we will see that we all have the same DNA end of the day. So it is very important to take a scientific look, to have more empathy, to have more connection with each other, and look at with more humanity within us. And that is how we will definitely achieve what we are set to achieve.
Very well said. Ramona, I saw you saying something, but you were on mute.
No, my mother had called. She
Oh.
somehow her link had messed up, and she was like, "I want to get back on. I want to get back on."
Okay. Oh, that's so awesome to know. Thank you, Ramona's mom, for listening to us, and we wish you all the best. And again, thank you, all listeners. We went actually half an hour beyond our set time for 12:30, but guess what? I think all the quotes and your comments were very inspirational. Obviously, there were very good moments of clarity and windows of possibility that you've laid out, and all those possible stories of how in the past we've built bridges, and we can continue to build those bridges if we just got lost in between. And I see you all as an advocate for building that stronger, not just between the Black and the Brown community, but also bringing the white allyship into this conversation as well. So thank you again for joining us tremendously, and we'll keep the panelists connected, so you continue to do your wonderful work. Best wishes, and have a wonderful rest of the Sunday and the next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for your vision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.